All right, guys, welcome to the second video that is going to talk about this Nashville construction project. At least in my demo, it is Nashville, but in your case, any city you would like, the coordinate geometry project. So remember, if you haven't seen part one, make sure to take a look at that because we're going to pick up where we left off. A little reminder here, make sure to press save every once in a while. So I'm going to go ahead and press save and save my work so far so that everything I did in part one is no longer going to be lost if something happens. So we're going to start by making our third station, and I kind of want it to be somewhere up in this general area. This is called the 5 Points area of Nashville. Again, if you don't know the names of these, you just kind of pick like this is East Nashville. You can find something on there. So this is going to be my third station. We're going to call it point F. Again, I want to make it the 5 points. I'm going to guess for now, we're going to call it 3, 2. So that's where my third point's going to be. Now, in the project, you need to create two different types of triangles. So classified by sides. So scaling triangle is going to be the most easiest one to do because usually triangles have 3 different sides. So I want to, in particular this time, create an isosceles triangle. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So I have my 5 point station. So we have B for Broadway, A for airport, F for 5 points. I want my 5 points and my airport to be the same distance that the airport is from Broadway. So one of the other folders I'm going to create here is going to be my distances folder. So let's go ahead and create a new folder, hit the plus button, hit folder. We'll call this distances. And what I'm going to do is if you type in the word distance and then parentheses, and I type in the 2 points, which remember Broadway is B, airport is A, you can see that my distance is about 5.7 or 5.8. I can also do this distance between 5 points, F, and the airport, which is A, and I got that as 5. So actually, I'm pretty close to getting the right answer. I want 5 points and the airport to be exactly 5.78 or 5.8 units away. So I'm going to click on my 5 points and I'm going to stretch it. And as you see, as I move it, in real time, it's updating the distance. So when I do that, again, this whole area is 5 points or East Nashville. So I'm just going to kind of keep going until I get that number that I want. So it doesn't have to be exact. In fact, if you get it to the nearest 10th, that's going to be more than enough. And there it is. I came up with it. So this is the location where I want to put my 5 point station so that now triangle, as I'm going to call it, FAB, is now going to be an isosceles triangle. So I'm going to drag these distance calculations into my distances section. You'll need those for the end of the project. The last distance I'm going to get is distance between 5 points and Broadway. So we'll drag that in there too. We're now going to create these two segments. And I'm going to create these two segments the exact same way I created the other tunnel where I'm going to use point slope form. So the general skeleton for this is I'm going to choose y minus, and then in both cases I'm going to use, or actually in the first case, I'll use the airport station as my point. So it'll be y minus -1 or y plus 1 equals, I'll leave a blank for slope to calculate that next, and then this is going to be x minus 7. So once I put my slope in, that'll create my 5 points to my airport. And then while we're at it here, let's go ahead and create my last line. We'll use Broadway as my point. So y minus 0 equals, leave a blank for slope, x minus 1.3. Remember, you can pick either point for point slope form and it will still connect the lines. So now I'm going to go ahead on the side here and find these two slopes real quickly by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I'll be back here in a second to explain the next steps. I'm back, and I went ahead and found my slopes. Now, the way I did this is using my calculator, either my TI-84 or the scientific ones. You can put them in your calculator, and it will simplify it as a fraction for you, even if it turns out to be a 3-digit numerator and denominator. But you can see, nonetheless, I've created these segments. Now, this first one is the 5 points to airport line. And so what I can do is I'm going to restrict the domain to start at the x value at 5 points and end at the x value of the airport. So 5 points begins at 2.16 less than x, and then I'll do another less than symbol, and the airport is at 7. Close the brackets, and there it is. And then down below here, another curly bracket. This time I want to go from Broadway to 5 points. Again, we're always using x values. So Broadway is at 1.3, and 5 points is at 2.16. So that's going to create my other two, and we have now created an isosceles triangle. We can click and slide these up. I'll close my station folder. I'm going to move these up into my tunnel folder. And to help you a little bit later on, if you want to make sure that you remember which one is which, one piece of advice you can do is you can hit this plus button and add a note. And so the reason why I would like this is because, for example, I'm going to call this Broadway to Airport. That was the first one we created. Insert note. I'm going to put another note above this one. That I believe is my 5 points to Airport one. You can see how quickly you could forget. So it's nice to label this. So 5 points to Airport, and then my last note for the one below here, this was Broadway to 5 points. And so at this point, I'll collapse that. We've created our triangle. And so what we're going to do for the remainder of the time in this video is we are going to construct a perpendicular bisector, create a station at the end of that, and then I will also create an altitude, which will then open the door for you to add in your other segments and stations to finish the project. So we're going to move on and do the perpendicular bisector. And in particular, I want to do the perpendicular bisector of Broadway to Airport. So the line that we would need to use for this, or the tunnel, is right here, Broadway to 5 points. So just as a note here, the slope for this, so I'm going to start creating the line now. We don't know what the point's going to be yet, so I'll just kind of leave it as a blank right now. But if I go equal, the slope is going to be the opposite reciprocal of the Broadway Airport line, which is right here. So if the slope is negative 10 over 57, the perpendicular bisector would have the opposite reciprocal, which would be 57 over 10. The last point that we would need to fill in to find the perpendicular bisector is going to be the midpoint. And so I'm going to just quickly find the midpoint by averaging, let's go back to our points real quick. So between Broadway and the airport, so B and A. So I'm going to take 1.3 plus 7 divided by 2. I'm doing this in my calculator, so the x coordinate is 4.15. And then the y value we're going to take, again, B and A, so 0 plus negative 1 divided by that will be negative 1/2. So you can see right there, we've created our perpendicular bisector. I'll leave that in red just to denote the importance of that segment. Also, it might not be a bad idea if you notice my midpoint of between Broadway and the airport is on top of a cemetery. And I mean, do we have a tunnel end of the cemetery? Well, you never know. Maybe you do. So let me go ahead and actually enter that as a point. So it was 4.15 comma negative 0.5. So we'll call it point C, and then I'll write cemetery. So that's actually going to meet one of the criteria of having a midpoint station. So there's my midpoint station. It will be the cemetery. I'll drag that back into my points. And then in terms of my tunnels, we can now move that perpendicular bisector up into, where's it at? Oh, in my tunnel section here. So there it is. And I can add a little note if I want to denote this as the perpendicular bisector. I'll just say P dot B dot of segment BA. So now that's going to tell me what the perpendicular bisector will be. Notice it's a line, it goes on forever. So if you do want to restrict it, maybe I want to create another station up here at the Cumberland River, for example, you can pick that point, create another station there, and then you can truncate it at the end. If we have time at the end of the video, I'll do that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and find an altitude. So for this last segment, I want to create an altitude that begins at the airport and is perpendicular to FB, FB being the 5 points Broadway line. So to find the equation of that, let's go ahead and create not a station, let's create the line. So it'll be y minus, we're going to use the airport point, so it'll be y minus negative 1 or y plus 1. We'll come back and get slope in a minute. X minus, and then the x coordinate of the airport is 7. So there it is. Remember that the slope that I want to have here is going to be the opposite reciprocal of segment FB, or 5 points to Broadway. 5 points to Broadway is 217 over 86. So the opposite reciprocal of that is negative 86 over 217. And voila, this green segment we now have is the altitude of this triangle. So what I've created now are 2 of the requirements. I'll go ahead and I'll drag this one up into my folder for tunnels. And we can also add a little note here to remind myself that this is the altitude of triangle FBA. So there it is. It's denoted, and we have that finished. So we'll collapse these for a minute and just take a look at what we've created so far. So we've done a lot of the requirements that we needed to. You could create a station here. It actually so happens it's near where the Tennessee Titans play, so you actually could create a station there for that. But what I want to do for the last part of the video is just show you if I wanted these two things to have a station at the end so that I could cut them off and have them end somewhere, that would be probably ideal. So in the case of the perpendicular bisector, I started at the cemetery, and if I want to, let's say, create a point right around here, and we'll call this the river station because it's near the Cumberland River. So I'll go ahead and add a new point. We'll call it point R. And I'm just, once again, going to kind of guess what it is. I'm going to say 5, maybe. Okay, I was kind of close. It's 5 looks good. Maybe if I move it over to like 5.1. Or maybe 5.15. Nope. You just got to fine tune it, play around with it. 5.11, that looks good. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this the river station. And that's where I want my perpendicular bisector to end. So I'm going to have it start at the cemetery and end at the river station. The way that I'm going to do that is after dragging this up into my stations folder, let's go to our perpendicular bisector and we're going to restrict the domain. I want it to start where the cemetery is, which my cemetery point is 4.15, so 4.15 less than x, and then I want it to end at the river, and the river point that we just came up with was 5.11. And so by doing that, we've now created this red perpendicular bisector that is connecting from the cemetery to the river. That is another one of my tunnels that we can use here. And for the last part of the video, we're going to do that same thing with altitude. So maybe over here, we have a golf course. So let's go ahead and create another station, one more station here. We'll call it G equals. We'll once again just kind of guess where we think it is. So let's say -1, 2.2 maybe. Pretty close, maybe 2.15, 2.18. You can kind of just fine tune it and get it on there. There it is. We'll go ahead and we'll call this golf course. And just like we've been doing in all of these, we're going to go up to the altitude. We want it to start at the x value of the golf course, so all the way at the left. Golf course is at -1, less than x, so you can see it already now is starting at the golf course. I want it to end at the airport, so the airport is at x value of 7. So there we have it. I messed something up. Oh, there it is. We have it back. And we now have, I'll drag that up, we now have a major part of this project done. We've created a triangle, we've created a midpoint station, perpendicular bisector, and now an altitude. And so, yeah, you might need to create a couple other segments for this, but this is going to really create a majority of all the different things that we need to. And so using the skills from both of these videos, you want to now create and have some fun with this and make a city grid of various stations and tunnels that will help connect the city to its major points. That will conclude this second tutorial video. If there's anything from either of these videos that I did not cover, be sure to talk to your teacher and we'll be happy to help you with any other challenges or questions you may have. I hope you found both of these videos helpful, and good luck with your project and have some fun with it.